Our people are this company's most valuable asset.
Those words have been said by every CEO on the planet. But unfortunately, they don't always behave that way, and they don't always believe it. And that's because they often hold the view that people are this company's largest expense, and how can we reduce them? Maybe that's because employees are essentially treated as expenses through salaries and benefits. We invest in assets, like our houses, and we reduce expenses, like our electric bill. People are assets, not expenses. Unless you do what I do for a living, the word valuation probably doesn't come up every day. But if you've watched the show Shark Tank, you've heard a lot of conversations on the topic of valuation. That show made what I do sexy by bringing the word valuation into your living room every week. My name is Dave Bookbinder, and I'm a valuation professional. All right, I admit that sounded a lot sexier in my head. So I'm what you call a numbers guy. I have a bachelor's degree in economics, an MBA in finance, and I hold professional designations in the area of business valuation and intangible asset valuation. For the last 30 years, it's been my job to tell companies how much they and their most important intellectual property assets are worth. Business valuation is driven by the numbers. And the intangible assets that get the most attention are things like brands, patents, and cool technology. But I'm here to tell you that the most valuable asset that any business has is an intangible asset that doesn't even appear in its financial statement. It's people. That's right. This company's most valuable asset doesn't show up on a balance sheet with the other assets like desks and chairs. In my role as a valuation professional, I valued human capital. But I always thought that the way we value human capital doesn't tell the whole story. You see, the methodology that my profession uses to value people is based simply on what it would cost to replace you. In other words, we're saying that we could literally put anyone else in your job that has a similar background, pay them exactly what you're making, and they'd be exactly like you. From an accounting perspective, you're a commodity, not an individual. So is it any wonder that it's a challenge to persuade the CEO that people are assets and not expenses? But a product is nothing without the people behind it, building it, selling it, maintaining it. Even a company's brand is worthless without the employees delivering on that brand's promise. During the worldwide pandemic, this was more evident than ever. There were shampoo and scissors in hair salons, but no stylists to use them. There were tools and machines in manufacturing facilities, but no people to operate them. And ironically, it was the people in some of the most thankless positions who were being relied on to keep us all safe and fed, like supermarket employees, delivery drivers, and nurses. People are assets, not expenses. I'd like to take a moment to be clear about how I use the term human capital here in this conversation. And I want to be very, very clear. It's not in a disparaging way. You see, there are some people who are offended by the term human capital. They like to say that people aren't assets, meaning that companies don't own them. I use the term human capital so that it has resonance with the finance and accounting world and with the folks in the C-suite. I believe that if we're going to change the perspective that people are nothing more than expenses that need to be reduced, we need to think of people as assets worth investing in. My point here is that a company's financial capital and its intellectual capital don't mean much without the proper leadership from the human capital. Let's talk about leadership. During my career, I've been lucky enough to have had the opportunity to work for some truly great people. These people led with empathy and respect, and I'd walk through fire for them. They got my best stuff every day. I also worked for others who, well, didn't get it, not even a little bit. And you can imagine how much extra effort they got out of me. Early in my career, in fact, I worked for a guy whose leadership style is what I would call management by spreadsheet. The only thing he knew about the team was their productivity statistics. Yeah, not exactly inspiring. Have you ever felt like you were nothing more than a number on a spreadsheet to your boss? Let me take you back in time here for a moment to share something that I think most of you have likely experienced. Imagine you're at work. It's late morning. You had an easy commute. Traffic was light. Weather was great. You had a good laugh in the break room with a coworker, and you've got lunch plans with an old friend. And you're really looking forward to leading this afternoon's team meeting. Things are going smoothly. You're even feeling pretty good about knocking out all the items on your to-do list. Today is a good day. And then your phone rings, and the caller ID says mom or dad or maybe school. Yeah, uh-oh. So, you know that nervous, queasy feeling that you get in your stomach when that call comes? It's never good news, and it's never convenient. And now you're needed elsewhere. So your first thought, of course, is the concern for your loved one. You scramble to get your things ready so that you can head out as fast as you can. Then your next thought is about that afternoon meeting that you're going to have to miss and that to-do list. Yeah, your day just got blown up. For more than a decade, I was a divorced parent of 2 young children. As a single dad, when I had to leave the office to pick up a sick kid, some of my colleagues, the ones who didn't get it, actually got nasty. They'd roll their eyes, tell me how nice it must be to leave early, and suggest that I hire a nanny to avoid situations like this. Yeah, right, nice to leave early to pick up a sick kid. Can you even imagine? Well, maybe this is why they didn't get it. In the US, the average age when people become managers of other people is 31. And the average age when a US worker gets their first management training is 42. Let that sink in for a second. That means 99% of managers spend a full decade not knowing what they're doing, and worse yet, doing damage. They're left to figure it out for themselves, usually based on their own experiences working for other ineffective leaders. And so the cycle continues. I saw a quote recently, and it goes like this. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. Same is true with people. More often than not, when people struggle, it's the result of poor leadership, not a lack of leadership, but improper leadership. And it was through this type of poor leadership that I learned firsthand about employee engagement and how it impacts productivity, discretionary effort, and ultimately bottom line profitability. According to the folks at Gallup, roughly 7 out of 10 employees are checked out at work. They're disengaged, doing the bare minimum to get by. Even more damaging than the disengaged workers are the ones who become toxic. They're not just checked out, they're trying to take you down. Think about it this way. Imagine that your business is a lifeboat in the middle of the ocean with 10 people on board. 3 people in the front of the boat are actively rowing towards safety. 4 people in the middle of the boat aren't rowing at all. They're just looking around, admiring the icebergs. And the 3 people in the back of the boat are trying to sink it. SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management, says that disengaged employees cost the US about $500 billion a year in lost productivity. Imagine the upside if you could just increase employee engagement a little bit. The holy grail of employee engagement is when people give what's called discretionary effort. That's the going above and beyond, doing more than what's expected of them, going the extra mile. You get it. That's what drives innovation, productivity, and morale. Do it wrong, and companies will incur the high cost of disengagement and employee turnover. Or worse, people are assets, not expenses. Companies that do it right by investing in their people outperform their peers on just about every key performance benchmark, including turnover, productivity, and profitability. These companies harness discretionary effort by creating a corporate culture where people feel safe and valued. They create brand evangelists, and their employees tell their friends about how great it is to work there. This allows these companies to attract and retain the best talent. And all of it begins with setting a clear intention to overhaul the organization's culture and beliefs. In my journey to prove that people really are a company's most valuable asset, I've had conversations with CEOs who have done this culture change successfully, and they all say that it takes time. Up to 2 years, in fact, before your employees will believe that this isn't just another fad initiative. It needs to be embedded into the DNA of the organization. When your employees believe that this is the real deal, they go all in. This isn't just a project, it's a way of being. It's a restructuring of an organization's culture by eliminating the unwanted behaviors of the past and replacing them with the desired behaviors of the future. So this requires regular check-ins, checkups, and holding people accountable. One CEO that I spoke with has installed a no assholes policy, and he's enforced it. Now that sends a clear message to the staff, doesn't it? As a result of his intentional focus on culture change, company sales are up, profits are up, accidents are down, and people don't leave. Turnover is close to 0. But you don't need to just take my word for this. There are numerous studies that prove that companies that put their people first outperform their peers and produce better stock market returns. Doing well by doing good isn't just an optimistic catchphrase. Look at the growing popularity of ESG investing, that's environmental, social, and governance. Or the Business Roundtable, a group of about 200 CEOs redefining the purpose of a corporation to be more than just making a profit for its shareholders. And in the middle of a global pandemic, the Securities and Exchange Commission mandated certain human capital disclosures for publicly traded companies. This happened mid-pandemic. The timing of this should not be lost on any of us. There's a cultural shift that's taking place here, a movement really, and for good reason, because empirical data shows that companies actually do well by doing good. It's also been documented that companies that do it right also enjoy a lower cost of capital. A lower cost of capital means that a company can borrow at lower rates, for example. And the ability to borrow at a lower cost is a good thing in and of itself, but there's more. Can I give you a quick lesson on business valuation? I promise I'm not going to go too deep into the woods here. So valuation is a forward-looking exercise. In other words, while a company's historical financial performance is important, it's the expected future performance that matters more. That's because a company's value is determined by the present value of its future profits discounted back to today's dollars at its cost of capital. The way the math works is that the lower the cost of capital, the higher the present value of those future benefits, meaning the greater the value of the business. So can you see how human element is connected to the value of a business? People are assets, not expenses. So here's what I want you to take with you when you leave today. An engaged workforce is a more productive workforce. Greater productivity leads to increased profitability. Increased profitability leads to a greater value of the company. It's all connected. Every one of you has the opportunity to change the paradigm in the way that business valuations are determined. You have the opportunity to create more value in your business. Treat your employees with courtesy, empathy, and respect, and watch what happens to their level of engagement and the impact on the bottom line. I believe that now, more than ever, it's time for us to invest in our people and consider a new kind of ROI, a return on individuals. And that's why I like to say the value of a business is a function of how well the financial capital and the intellectual capital are managed by the human capital. You better get the human capital part right. Thank you.